I'm extremely delighted to be here today, and that's not just because I've been spending I've come to the JLF for the last 14 years, and I've been secretly manifesting this, but also because I have this great opportunity to be sitting here with two senior writers. A huge round of applause for Satyarth Nayak and Koral Dasgupta, please.
Thank you.
So, Satyarth and Koral write in similar genres as I do, except this is an extremely unique opportunity, not just for all of us, but also for me to learn. They've written multiple books. I have just the one book, right? And the reason why this is unique, despite it being the same genre, is because Satyarth has, the books or the scriptures that we focused on, or the time that these scriptures were written, the nature of the writing differs across the spectrum. Satyarth has, through Mahagatha, taken a look and recounted the stories from the Puranas. The Puranas that don't necessarily get the respect of the scriptures, but are smritis and are a lot recent. And there are a lot of interesting things we'll be talking about for the Puran. But Koral, on the other hand, has obviously a little further back. If you look in history, 300 BC is when I believe the epics were compiled. And Koral, on the other hand, has retold and given the voice to the voiceless as well. And me, on the other hand, I have reimagined. And I have focused on the oldest religious scripture on the planet, the Rig Veda. So we'll dive right in, and what we're going to be doing today in the short, truncated span of time we have left is we're going to be talking about the works. We're going to be talking about, why you guys have made the choices that you've made in your writing process, and, why we do what we do. Why is it that we connect, engage with these texts, with the texts, and reframe them for today? One of the things that, thank you, one of the things that I consistently asked myself, right, when I was writing the book, which is what is the purpose of what I'm trying to do? And, it's our responsibility, correct me if I'm wrong, Satyarth and Koral, that it's our responsibility to try and bring forward what is written in the scriptures holistically. Not just the popular stories, but what do they try and convey, right? And I felt that one of the ways to do that as writers was to focus on the little-known characters or tales from our scriptures, the epics, the Purans, what have you, right? So I want to start off with you, Satyarth. Is there, in your research, when you were diving into the Purans, is there a particular story or a character or a deity that you'd like to tell us about today?
Well, there are 100 stories, so which one do I pick? I think one story that I discovered while reading the Purans, and I've spoken about it at every platform because it's short, it's sweet, and it just tells you about the kind of, just the stature that the Purans give to women. So it so happens that all the gods come to Brahma one day, they're extremely famished, and they say, we have no food to eat. And Brahma says, how's that possible? I have created a very proper system where whenever there are yagyas down on earth, whenever havans happen down on earth, and oblations are poured into the fire, those oblations reach you as your god, what we call in Sanskrit as the havish. And then the gods bless you. So it's a very proper symbiotic cycle. And Agni folds his hands and says, I'm sorry, I don't seem to have the agency to make that transfer possible. And so Brahma scratches his foreheads and wonders what to do next. And then Brahma consults Prakriti, which is Mother Nature. And Prakriti creates a goddess. And Brahma says, you will now be that conduit who shall make the transfer possible. And it is because of you that we shall survive. Brahma asks the goddess, what has Prakriti named you? And the goddess replies, she calls me Swaha. So Brahma makes a rule that from now on, whenever a yajna happens, every line must end with the word Swaha. Only when the word Swaha is uttered will the transfer be possible. And then later Agni and Swaha marry, and they're forever united. So just the sheer beauty of the story, the power, the fact that here are these alpha male gods standing utterly helpless, and it's a woman who comes to their rescue. So I think women, a huge round of applause just for yourself, for being the nurturing and the nourishing agent that you are, and that is what the Puranas have always celebrated. So I think one of the many stories in Mahagatha which I absolutely love.
Just one of the many, mind you, the interesting stories in Mahagatha, 100 tales from the Purans. Moving on to you, Koral. Koral is a senior writer. She's focused and retold the stories of the Pancha Kanyas, right? Tara, Ahalya, Mandodari, Draupadi, right? And Kunti. And, I want to ask you, during your research, taking a close look at the epics, 2,000 years ago when they were compiled, was there a particular story or character that you'd like to tell us about today?
When you talk about research, I frankly did not do any. My way of looking at these, I am comparatively better at because I have read many versions, not because I will write someday, but just because I was interested. Now, when I am telling the stories, I am sticking to the storyline of a comics that a third grader would read, third or fourth grader. Yeah, so that is what most of the audience is aware of in the story format. And I'm not trying to give any gyan that, the kind of this happened and that happened and trying to establish any, because there are so many versions and so many truths. What I'm just trying to do is understand the stories from that data point and look, trying to read between the lines. So, Kunti had Karna with Surya, right? But after Kunti engaged with Surya, what happened? Did Surya disappear? Can't happen, right? There must be a ingrowth story between Kunti and Surya. That is my interest, developing that. Some questions that came to me while I was writing, and this is a part of the process that you are talking about. Kunti was mandated because she had that boon. Whether you call it a boon or a curse is a different thing, but then she had it. And she had to, since she had called upon Surya, she had to go with it. What stopped Surya from stopping it? He could have backed out, right? So if he hadn't backed out, that means it's like a contract. I may have signed it, but I have signed it along with the person and disabled the person from backing out if I have chosen that person. It's kind of that kind of a contract. So that is my work, trying to look at it, trying to understand it a little better. And about my favorite character, Pandu. Absolutely, we know Pandu as very weak king, right? Someone who was born because his mother grew pale when she was asked to engage with Vyasa. But if you look at Pandu's story, Pandu must have grown up knowing how he was born. So he grew up knowing that his mother was forced, and he was not exactly a celebrated child, though born in a royal family. So he grew up with that lacking. And then he grows up, he has 2 wives. Pandu is not a weak by his might, because he was a great warrior and he was the first teacher of Arjun before Dronacharya came. Yeah, he was the first teacher. Now Pandu grows up and he has 2 wives now, and he is struck by a curse that the moment he tries to have sex with another woman, he will die without a child. Now he is back to square one, and he knows that if this is known, Bhishma will once again do something, Niyoga type, and his wives will go through the same process that he went through. He rushes off with his 2 wives to the forest. That is where Kunti tells him that she has that boon. Now, your spouse tells you that she has a boon of this effect. What is the first question that comes to you? Did you try it? Obvious, right? The man will ask.
Correct.
And given the character of Kunti that she is, that helps me to derive that Pandu knew everything about Kunti, everything. But he allows her to go ahead. He doesn't sit with the ego. He allows her to go ahead, do what he wants, what she wants, call the god who she wants to, and have children. And he owns up those children, gives them the name Pandav, and they are his children, right? That brings me to the idea that this is one fabulous character who did not let his history repeat, one. And second, today, in our feminism concepts, we are talking about a happy mother raises happy children. Our Mahabharata told it so long ago, we missed it.
Beautifully said. It continues to surprise me how intricate the scriptures, they are. And if you dive into them, you'll unearth such great moral lessons that we can be applied today as well. For me, it was very similar to you, Koral. I was trying to understand about the Rig Veda for my book Samsara, and I came across the little-known daughter of Lord Shiv and the goddess of the mountains, Parvati. And we know about Lord Ganesh and Kartikeya, but very few people know that Aranyani is mentioned in the Rig Veda, the oldest religious scripture, not just in Hinduism, but the planet. And Aranyani is mentioned in the 8th mandal of the Rig Veda as, O Aranyani, art thou not afraid? O Aranyani, where art thou? And this goddess of the forest, even that long ago, 2500 BC, 5,000 years ago, was signifying this impending climate change, that elusive environmentalism that long ago. And, when I stumbled across that, I was dead sure that this was one of the things that I wanted to highlight through Samsara. And Samsara, Koral's work, Mahagatha by Satyarth continue to, in their own way, be retellings. And that's another thing that I want to discuss here with you today, that the power of retellings. Not only do they make things more accessible, but I want to mention quickly that this is a question that gets asked so often on JLF panels in the past with a similar topic. So show of hands, how many of you believe that the Lakshman Rekha is part of the Ramayana? Absolutely. And you're absolutely, you're all correct. Except, did you know, right, that the Lakshman Rekha does not find mention in the earliest version of the Ramayana, written by Valmiki ji, almost 200 BC, and neither does it find in recent retellings, such as Tulsidas ji's Ramcharitramanas, either 1600 AD. But you must have seen it in the 80s Doordarshan show that I'm sure a lot of you would have watched. And it actually comes from Adyut Atma Ramayana. Did you guys know? Yes, and the Bengali Ramayana. There's several that mention it too. We had a discussion about this earlier recently. And, Satyarth, I want to ask you first, because the Puranas mention a ton of great stories that we want to dive into. And one of the most famous of them is the Samudra Manthan, the churning of the ocean of milk. And adding to that popularity has been the tale of the Kumbh Mela. Why or how exactly are the 4 locations of the Kumbh Mela decided, right? And it is believed that after the Samudra Manthan, after the Dev and the Asur churned the ocean of milk, 4 drops fell in what is now India, and these are the locations. So I'm curious to understand, how is it in Mahagatha, what is your approach been towards deciding these stories in Mahagatha, and how did you decide what makes the cut, what is the format, the structure of it? Take us through the process.
Okay, that's like 5 questions in one question. So basically, I think the idea was to, of course, dive into the Puranas. I mean, we have all grown up reading and loving mythology. So for me, it was about entering the staggering world of Puranas. Like when I said every podcast, at every platform, that, I kind of deep dived into the Puranas, and hopefully I came out with 100 pearls. The idea was that's the kind of stories that these are. For me, what was interesting was to, also, what is interesting about Mahagatha is that for the first time, you have the best stories, the best wisdom of the Puranas under one roof. That was a huge objective. I wanted to put everything under one roof so that, our generations, current and, those who are coming, you get a sense of the wisdom that is there. And like when we launched the book in Bombay, we had Ayan Mukherjee launching the book. He said, Satyarth, I'm not someone who will read a Shiv Puran or a Vishnu Puran because I'll find it highly academic. But for me, what Mahagatha does is that it gives me an access into that world. It gives me a very easy access, and an access through stories. Because there's no better entry point into anything than stories. I mean, stories are implanted in our DNA, the love for stories. So that, I think, was the main objective. Also the fact that this is the first collection that is not a random collection of stories. It is a chronology. So you start with the creation of the universe in Satya Yuga, then how Brahma is created, how Vishnu comes, how Mahadev comes, how the goddesses come, how the demons come, and then the time starts Satya Yuga, then you come to the stories of Treta Yuga, and Dwapar, and finally Kali. So what Mahagatha does is that stories that we might have known as singular episodes, random episodes, or standalone episodes, Mahagatha takes it zooms out and gives you a wider view of the entire universe. So you are reading a novel, which is why we're calling it Mahagatha. There are 100 gathas together, they're making one Mahagatha. So that was the idea about, how to create the book.
Koral, coming to you, this is your forte, retellings, right? And I'm genuinely very curious to know, when you were unearthing the stories of these iconic women from the epics, the Pancha Kanyas, it couldn't have been easy, because despite the scriptures being some of the longest, the Mahabharata is the longest poem on the planet, but I think the women don't get as much screen time as the men, perhaps. So how was your process, and how do you approach the uncovering and the unearthing of your protagonists?
See, firstly, I must tell you that you probably get to do the kind of work that I have done, and that is not just me writing. That is also about connecting with Pan Macmillan. That is also about connecting with the readers. And we don't do paid publicity. Right? The entire thing that happened, it cannot happen without a blessing. तो मेरे ऊपर कुछ तो है. मेरे ऊपर हम सब के ऊपर. That we connected. So I have a lot of gratitude towards that it had to happen through me, it happened through me, so I cannot take the entire credit. Even the stories came to me like that through my reading. And probably a lot of things that, as a woman, you go through a lot of things in your personal life, and not everything you talk about. कुछ चीज़ें हैं जो आपके अंदर ही दबी रहती है, because you have to choose your fights. But when you approach literature, वो ना किसी तरीके से मतलब अपना एक नदी बह जाती है. So that also, when I was writing, those things flew and got more relatable maybe in these stories. I could find out. But the most important thing that I must say here is that for long, we have tried to understand Ramayana and Mahabharata as commercial fiction. These are not commercial fictions, they are philosophy, written by great sages, great philosophers in very ancient past, right? And when they were writing, they didn't think that who will be the audience of future. ये एक हिंदू पढ़ेगा या मुस्लिम पढ़ेगा, एक औरत पढ़ेगी या एक मर्द पढ़ेगा, ब्राह्मण पढ़ेंगे या शूद्र पढ़ेगा. They were not thinking about that. They just wrote the stories with certain truth in their mind. They were aware of certain truth, and they brought them together, compiled them together, and put across certain stories. So everything in these philosophical narratives is a metaphor. Everything that is happening, every character has some philosophical concoction to it. And it is very important to understand the philosophy under each story. When you look at them, and it's not just about Ramayana, Mahabharata, Purana, Bible, Quran, koi bhi. These are all philosophical narratives. They are trying to tell you certain truth. Jaan lo, uske baad, what you follow, what is your right, what you have to do, what are your circumstances, and from all these filters, what is your dharma? You decide, right? Now, when you are going through all these stories, and of course, we lost the philosophical connect primarily because of the language. We couldn't keep up with Sanskrit. Sanskrit जैसे ही हट गया, it became very colloquial, right? एक बंगाली आ गया, एक मलयालम आ गया, एक गुजराती आ गया. So it got spread, and every time a translation happened, something new was added. But the maximum issue that I feel about the retellings of these stories is the causes that got attached. People did not just tell the stories. They tried to cling on to causes. हर एक era में, given the needs and the causes of that particular era, people try to pick up their causes and they try to tell the stories from the lenses of those causes, which trash them even more. आप बात कर रहे थे लक्ष्मण रेखा की. Tell me one person जिसको लक्ष्मण रेखा नहीं चाहिए. It is simple. Every person, Lakshman Rekha appears for every person. The moment you misunderstand your limits and cross them, there is danger. ये तो हर किसी के लिए है ना, मेरे लिए, आपके लिए, सत्यार्थ के लिए. It is not just about women. But when the feminists read Ramayana, they pointed out Sita को लक्ष्मण रेखा के अंदर रखा, मतलब they are trying to put a barrier around women. अरे bullshit. We are talking about Sita's Agni Pariksha, right? There is a Western proverb which says a leader has to walk through fire. We celebrated it. Wow, man, they said it. रामायण में लिखा हुआ है द लीडर वॉक थ्रू फायर, वी डिडंट अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इट मेंट. वो मैं मीनिंग बताऊंगी नहीं, तारा में है, पढ़ लेना सबके साथ.
You guys must get Tara for sure. But, you know, I loved what she said. Koral is focusing on the essence, you know, in the retellings. And that brings me, because, you know, Satyarth, to be very honest, when I was writing, and I took 10 years, I gave everything to this book. And I am hoping to write a lot more like you, Koral, and you, Satyarth. But when I was writing this book, the one question that also bothered me was, what is the purpose of religion? What purpose does religion serve today, right? And I consistently came back to the idea that that religion serves to make us better humans, so that we are kinder, we live more balanced lives, more in confluence with all living beings around us, and most importantly, the journey within, right? To face our fears, fight our vices, and learn the truth about ourselves. Even Vishwamitra in the Ramayana tells the 4 sons of Dashrath that the ultimate aim is to let go of aham and find Brahman, right? So I do that in my book. What I do is I transport modern day Indians like yourself, right, like us, and I take them to a hidden magical valley in the Himalayas that's mentioned in the Garud Puran, and as Siddha Ashram, and where they come face to face with the gods, alive and kicking. And through this, I tackle important questions about society today. So we start with you first this time, Koral. What, according to you, is the purpose of religion, and how can we, as writers, aim to recalibrate that through our works?
You know, we have very myopic idea of religion, and till the time our time comes, we don't understand the impact of religion. There are many ways for me to justify this. One is, religion, you believe, is God's world. So whatever happens in God's world, God is absolute, God is not to be contested, God is correct. So when you perceive religious stories, जहाँ पे men are macho and women are accepting towards whatever is happening, you feel that is correct. So that molds your social behavior and interpersonal behavior, the way men treat women and women treat men. However, Hindu philosophy, the moment you turn religion into philosophy, Hinduism believes in rebirth. So, in the context of rebirth, if you, having a male body, believe that you can torture a woman, kalko you can come into a woman's body, right? So, that is how things are, you know, when it comes to philosophy, things are connected like this. And everybody tries to be fearing of a future, कि आज का मेरा कर्मा, कल मेरा कल बनाएगा, right? Other than that, religion is so deeply embedded. Now, I'll tell you, when my child, he's 11 now, when he was 2 years old, he had he suddenly started contracting. And in 11 p.m., on my hand, he just shivered terribly and still. I have never in my life prayed. I believed in God. I loved the concept of Shiva, Kali, Durga. I went to mandaps, but I never prayed. It's my husband who always stands after bath in front of the temple and ek mantra jap karta hai. I never did. But that day, you know, mere muh se nikal gaya shiv, 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 shiv. There's no other place to go. There's no other place to ask from, and there's no doctor. You know, उस time पे वही समझ में आया. And later I realized कि ये मेरे अंदर आया कहाँ से? Because I was not the praying kind of a person. I am a very practical, you know, yeah. It is that deep inside us, the understanding of religion. So, if we are trying to follow religion, we could be atheists or we could be religious. We could do a puja or we could just get along believing that our karma is our, you know, dharam. But end of the day, you know, it is the religion that, it is your belief as in your faith, whatever you are believing in, that creates a path for you. And that path is very important, that what you are choosing as your path.
No, you're right. Faith finds us, you know, when you're in the hospital, for even the most rational of us. Faith finds us when you've achieved your goal or when you can't make sense of life. Satya, what do you have to add? What is the purpose of religion, and how can we recalibrate this through our work?
It's a very complex question. I'm sure we cannot answer that, especially with a ticking clock that's showing 10 minutes. But like she spoke about the fact that it kind of you derive some sort of a refuge, some sort of a solace from it. I think for me, religion would be something that ultimately puts everybody on an equal stand. We are all the same, and anything religion, and that is the most important tenet of all. I mean, again, if I illustrate this through a story, so Mahadev chops the head of Brahma because Brahma was lusting after his daughter. So while what he did was right, but that head sticks to the hand of Mahadev because he has committed Brahmahatya. So in the eyes of nature, while what Mahadev did is justified, it is still Brahmahatya. So Mahadev, who's Devokadev, he now has to wander through the entire universe looking for salvation. And finally, when he enters Earth at one particular place, that hand falls by itself. That head falls by itself, and he knows that he has been purged. So that place today is called Kashi or Banaras, where we go for to expiate our sins. So the fact that the rules are the same, whether you're human or whether you are God, the rules remain the same. I mean, there is a story of the way when Chandra and Tara elope. And they have an affair. Tara is married to Brihaspati, but they have an affair. And ultimately, when the gods command Brihaspati to take Tara back as his wife, Tara says, but I also have a son who's now in my womb, and that is Chandra's son. Will you accept him? Brihaspati refuses, but the gods force him. So Brihaspati curses the unborn fetus that when you take birth, you shall be a neuter. You will not have any gender. When he grows up, that is one story. Parallelly, there is a king called Sudyumna who enters a forest and becomes a woman, because that forest is the love nest of Mahadev and Parvati, and Mahadev has created a magic fantasy, something on the lines of Samsara, that any man who enters would become a woman because he would not want a male gaze to fall on Parvati while they're making love. So when Sudyumna says, I'm a king, I cannot become a woman, Mahadev says, fine, I'll modify the curse. You will become a man for 1 month, and the next month you'll become a woman. So you'll keep alternating between two genders. So on one hand, we have Tara's son who grows up as Buddh, who has no gender. He's a neuter. On the other hand, we have Sudyumna, who is a man, and Ila, who is a woman, a person who has both the genders. And Sudyumna and Ila and Buddh marry. And from there comes the Chandravanshi dynasty. So the fact that everybody has a place, everybody is given his or her work within the working of karma, within the working of dharma, within the working of the universe. Any religion that does that and does not discriminate, for me, that I think should be the greatest and most important thing for it. Especially in today's extreme hyper-Hindu climate that we are living in, when there is a constant effort to create one grand narrative and every other narrative is false. Look at the Ardhanarishwara. What do you see? You see a man and a woman coming together. But what do I see? I see that if there is one narrative, there has to be a counter-narrative. And only when the two narratives come together can there be a third and a new narrative. And that is how we evolve. So let's be very clear about that.
Very well said, Satyarth. We have individualistic understanding of God. Koral, do you want to talk a little bit about that? What is yours?
I will begin with explaining God and Shaitan and Bhagwan both. And I'll start with an instance from Ramayana. If you look at God's world, there's Jatayu, right? जो चाहे तो अपना जान दे सकता है for something that he believes is his duty to do. If you look at an equivalent in Ravan's world, there is Pushpak, जो अपने मर्जी से उड़ भी नहीं सकता, right? He can obey. Pushpak will obey orders, but will not have a mind of his own. In Rama's world, you have birds, monkeys, many kinds of animals and birds. In Ravan's world, we have the evidence of only one animal, that is the golden deer, जो कि एक मायावी है, right? So I have reason to say that Rama's world is full of emotional intelligence and Ravan's world is artificial intelligence. So the idea of Shaitan वो नहीं, मतलब this is what our epics are saying, that Shaitan वो नहीं जो एक चाकू लेके घूम रहा है. आप उसको देखोगे आपको मालूम है कि वो आपको मार देगा. और कितने को मारेगा? 1, 2, 10 with that one चाकू. शैतान वो है जो बहुत खूबसूरत है, बहुत टैलेंटेड है, जैसे रावण को दिखाया गया है, वेरी टैलेंटेड, वेरी एरुडाइट, वेरी इन्फ्लुएंशियल, वेरी इंस्पायरिंग. वो आपका सोच बंद कर सकता है. They will not allow you to think independently. They will make you believe that shaitan is so inspiring कि उसको follow करना चाहिए, right? And in Rama's world, Rama allows each and every individual to think of his own. हम लोग बोलते हैं मर्यादा पुरुषोत्तम, right? He is called Maryada Purushottam not because he did the right things. He only chose what is his right. आप agree करो, disagree करो, absolutely fine. Rama is taking it. कल देवदत्त जी आपको बोल रहे थे कि Rama did not have an ambition. उसको कुछ नहीं चाहिए था. He was just doing his duty, which is the truth of Rama. So, if you look at Shaitan, the film Oppenheimer, which talks about the making of the worst bomb in the world, थे तो बहुत बड़े साइंटिस्ट ना, लेकिन अपना टैलेंट गलत इस्तेमाल किया, रावण. And on the other hand, if you try to understand God, भगवान, we have to understand that भगवान वो शख्स नहीं है जो कि हमारे प्रेयर्स, मतलब हम लोग बोलते हैं ना मुझे बहुत पैसे चाहिए, मुझे एग्ज़ाम में पास करा दो, शाम को बिरयानी दिला दो. भगवान वो करने के लिए नहीं बैठे हुए हैं. भगवान is sitting there to strike a balance between so many elements, living and non-living, existing, sustaining. Bhagwan is trying to thread everything together so that everything can sustain and help each other. When you understand this about God, and you also understand that आपको जो भी मिल रहा है या नहीं मिल रहा है, that is happening through an automated system which starts with your karma. जो आप करते हो वही जाके भरते हो. उसमें भगवान का कुछ नहीं है. आपके साथ कुछ गलत हो रहा है, ऐसा नहीं कि भगवान आपसे कम प्यार करते हैं. And vice versa. That is when you understand this about God, your prayers change. You understand that I can do something to help God, right? You understand that, see, Satyarth, we have come here to the stage with certain privileges. And if we understand God, if we value God, we will try to understand that हमें ही ये privileges क्यों मिले. हमारे से ज़्यादा talented कोई इस दर्शकों में हो सकते हैं, right? और ऐसे बहुत से लोग हैं जिन्हें अपने टैलेंट का कदर नहीं मिला. अगर हमें वो प्रिविलेज दिया गया है, देन इट इज़ आवर ड्यूटी. इसीलिए दिया गया है, भगवान ने हमें इसलिए चुना है शायद, क्योंकि हमारे में वो ताकत है कि हम अपने साथ साथ दूसरों का भी हाथ पकड़ के उन्हें ऊपर ला सकें. तभी हमें वो दिया गया है. सो इफ़ वी आर बिलीवर्स ऑफ गॉड, we will have to dedicate ourselves not towards self-growth, but a collective growth, which in philosophical terms is called spiritual growth. That is my understanding of God.
You know, but this responsibility also comes with its downsides. So, with an eye on time, quick question and quick answers. How do you, Koral, given that you've written so many books in the genre, and Satyarth, he's written across genres, but his next book is going to be in the same genre. So, 100 tales in one, right? So quickly, how do you respond to feedback, and personally, and how does your work respond to it?
Feedback, अलग-अलग तरीके के आते हैं. There are some who are very, very happy about whatever I'm writing. God bless them, And then there are few, मतलब they are less in numbers, but they also exist, जो मुझे कई बार कहते हैं कि आपको कुछ नहीं मालूम. So I agree with them. मुझे एक्चुअली कुछ नहीं मालूम. मैं तो कह रही हूँ कि क्लास 3 लेवल कॉमिक्स से शुरुआत है मेरा. तो I agree, मुझे कुछ नहीं मालूम, बस बुक लिख रही हूँ.
So I had a feedback. So there was one Insta message that is very close to my heart. So it's a small girl who wrote back saying, when I was a child, my mother used to read out stories to me. And now my mother has lost her vision. So I am reading out Mahagatha stories to her. So, I think the fact that the book is cutting across generations, cutting across hearts, I have, a lot of people right here who have been writing to me and who loved the book. So I think what more can an author ask for? So thank you so much. Also puts a lot of pressure for the next one. But yeah, we'll keep trying and we'll do our best. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got very little time left. So I just want to quickly talk about how I deal with feedback. And, Samsara is a product of feedback. Throughout the 10 years, I've had support from friends, editors, readers, bookstagrammers, non-readers, you name it. In fact, if you end up grabbing a copy of Samsara, you'll see that on the back cover, there's a QR code that gives you access to a Discord server where individuals, even right now, many have come together to flesh out what the second book in the series will look like. So feedback for me truly is the crux and the cornerstone of Samsara.
See, we need to learn all this. QR code behind a book. Okay.
No, but there are instances where I got contradictory feedback, to be honest, and that's when I went back to the scriptures, because more than anything, you've retold, you've also retold, but I've reimagined. I'm trying to bring the essence of the Rig Veda as well. Before we end, because we've got very little time, I asked Koral and Satyarth to say anything that I may have forgotten that you'd like to add. I do want to reinstate. Okay, we'll take one question. We were told that we won't have time for it. Can someone please help her with a mic? And while that happens, want to quickly remind everyone that don't forget to collect your copies. Koral, Satyarth, and I will be joining you guys in the tent behind. So please don't forget to get your copies signed. And yes, please, your question.
Hi, I'm Sakena. Just one question. Satyarth, Saksham, Koral ma'am, wonderful story skills you have, and I just loved when all three of you were talking. So I wanted to ask, your narratives are how do you build that narrative? Because you are telling something that has not existed. Your world building skills, it's something that's very different from what has been written, but it is a new voice. And especially in Saksham's case, actually, because you have built a world that does not exist.
I think this applies more to you than us, because we are creating that already has been created. So we are standing on the shoulders of great giants, but I think his has been a complete new world.
Very good question. And you've recounted, you've retold, but in my case, it's the essence of the scriptures and the philosophy that comes through. And I try and popularize these very stories that, for the masses. Like I've said, it's been dubbed as India's answer to Harry Potter. So there was an active element of world building and imagination as well involved. I'm not going to lie. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Saksham.